Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters, and welcome back to the Islamic SHAHADA channel. In a world often defined by cultural clashes, political polarization, and religious misunderstanding, some individuals rise above the noise, quietly becoming bridges between worlds that rarely meet. One such figure was Thomas J. Abercrombie, not just a photographer for National Geographic, but a deeply curious human being whose lens captured more than just images. It captured humanity. Abercrombie's journey took him across deserts and mountains, into sacred spaces, and through spiritual landscapes. Along the way, he became more than an observer. He became a participant, and somewhere in the midst of it all, he found Islam, not as an ideology, but as a personal path. Born on August 13, 1930 in Stillwater, Minnesota, Tom Abercrombie was raised in the heart of the American Midwest. As a boy, he was deeply curious, interested in everything from history to geography, but it was a parade that sparked his passion for photography. At the age of 15, during the Lumberjack Days parade, Tom watched returning World War II pilots march through town. Among them was his older brother, Bruce, who had brought home a camera from Italy, a Leica. That single object ignited Tom's lifelong pursuit. One of his first photos was of his girlfriend, Lynn. With that image, a lifelong calling began. After a brief stint in the military, cut short by a fungal infection in his feet, Abercrombie pursued journalism. His early work at the Fargo Forum and the Milwaukee Journal earned him the Newspaper Photographer of the Year award. His eye for detail and his instinct for powerful storytelling soon caught the attention of National Geographic. In 1956, he officially joined the magazine, beginning a career that would take him to over 40 countries and across every inhabited continent. But Abercrombie wasn't just a photographer, he was a seeker, someone who didn't just want to take pictures, but wanted to understand the people behind them. When National Geographic sent Abercrombie to the Middle East, he didn't approach it like a typical Western journalist. He approached it with reverence. He immersed himself in the culture, learned Arabic, and built deep relationships with people in the region. One of his most remarkable moments was an interview with Camille Chamoun, then president of Lebanon. Known for being stiff and guarded, the president let down his walls in Abercrombie's presence. Not only was the interview candid, but Abercrombie was also invited to photograph the president and his wife relaxing under a tree, an intimate moment few journalists would ever witness. He brought this same authenticity everywhere he went. In Afghanistan, he didn't just photograph the traditional game of buzkashi, a chaotic sport played on horseback. He joined in. Dusty, battered, but triumphant. He returned with images that were raw and honest, images that no outsider had ever captured from the inside before. Tom Abercrombie wasn't just brave behind the lens. He took real risks to help others. In Tibet, he reportedly used a pocket knife to amputate the toe of a pilgrim suffering from gangrene when no medical help was available. In Iran, after an earthquake struck, he performed makeshift surgery on a victim. While these stories are difficult to fully verify, they reveal how far he was willing to go, not just for a photograph, but for a person. Abercrombie's greatest strength may have been his humility. He learned not only Arabic, but also German, French, and Spanish. He didn't treat local cultures as exotic backdrops. He treated them as living communities with depth and dignity. As he spent more time in Muslim countries, his interest in Islam grew. He learned to read the Quran in Arabic and began using the name Omar while traveling. Though he never made a public statement about converting to Islam, it became increasingly clear to those who knew him that his spiritual orientation had shifted, but he never felt the need to broadcast it. To him, actions mattered more than declarations, one colleague later said. In 1972, Abercrombie published one of his most famous National Geographic features, The Sword and the Sermon. It was a sprawling, powerful photo essay on the Muslim world, covering Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Afghanistan, and beyond. While working on that story, he visited Kazakhstan and attended Friday prayers in a mosque in Alma-Ata, now Almaty. He introduced himself to the local imam, speaking in Arabic. The older Kazakh worshippers, many of whom had never seen photographs of Mecca or the Hajj, gathered around in awe as Abercrombie showed them his images. Some wept. Others touched his clothes, then wiped their faces with reverence. "I was overwhelmed," Abercrombie later recalled in the magazine. "They treated me as though I had brought a piece of the sacred with me." Abercrombie passed away on April 3, 2006. He left behind not only a remarkable archive of photographs, but also a legacy of understanding. At a time when both Muslims and Westerners were frequently trapped in cycles of mutual suspicion, Abercrombie showed that connection was still possible. He didn't lecture, he didn't politicize, he simply witnessed and invited others to do the same through his lens. Through his work, many Muslims around the world saw, for the first time, an American who listened, who respected their faith and culture. And through the same images, many Americans saw for the first time a human side of Islam that the headlines rarely showed: beauty, dignity, family, worship, and peace. Tom Abercrombie's life reminds us that journalism at its best is not about clickbait or conflict. It's about building understanding. His camera was not a weapon, but a bridge. His heart was not a spectator, but a participant. In an era when the world feels increasingly divided, we need more people like him, people willing to step outside their comfort zones, to see others not as foreign, but as fellow travelers on a shared journey. Tom Abercrombie may not have shouted his faith from the rooftops, but in quiet ways, in images and in action, he revealed a truth that transcends religion, nationality, or profession. We are closer than we think. While Tom Abercrombie's path to Islam was shaped by his physical journey, capturing the faith through the intimacy of a camera lens, others arrived through different doors. For some, it wasn't the warmth of Middle Eastern hospitality or the majesty of a mosque at dawn that opened their hearts, but the quiet pull of reason, philosophy, and deep contemplation. Islam doesn't have just one path in. It reaches artists and scientists alike, speaks to both emotion and intellect. And if Abercrombie represents the power of visual witness, then the man we meet next embodies the power of thought. A man who came not from the world of media, but from the world of diplomacy, policy, and rational discourse. Murad Wilfried Hofmann was not searching for religion when he found Islam. A German ambassador and seasoned NATO official, he was the kind of man who operated at the highest levels of government, measured, analytical, and highly educated. And yet, beneath the polished exterior of Western diplomacy, questions stirred about meaning, about modernity, about truth. His journey wasn't shaped by the streets of Cairo or the festivals of Kabul. It was shaped by revolutions he witnessed, books he read, and the tension he felt between the West's material success and its spiritual confusion. Murad Wilfried Hofmann was not a mystic, a traveler, or a spiritual wanderer. He was a diplomat, a man of protocol, logic, and European precision. Born in 1931 in Aschaffenburg, Germany, and raised in a devout Catholic household, Hofmann seemed destined for a life of traditional success. He studied law at Harvard. He rose through the ranks of West Germany's foreign service. He became a NATO official, and later, the ambassador to Algeria and Morocco. Everything in his life followed the careful script of a post-war European elite. But behind the polished titles and diplomatic composure, questions stirred. Questions that would one day lead him far beyond embassies and treaties, to a completely different worldview. It did not begin with a crisis of faith or a spiritual vision. It began with observation. In the early 1960s, Hofmann was posted in Algeria during its brutal war for independence from French colonial rule. He witnessed revolution up close, the bloodshed, the political upheaval, the collapse of old orders. But what lingered with him most was not the chaos of war. It was the strength and dignity of ordinary Muslims who, amid unimaginable suffering, held tightly to their faith. They prayed under fire. They fasted in poverty. They lived with restraint and order when everything around them was falling apart. What I saw, Hofmann would later write, was a moral structure that endured when everything else had collapsed. Returning to Europe, those impressions haunted him. He began reading the Quran, at first skeptically as an intellectual exercise, but the more he read, the more something unexpected happened. He didn't find confusion or contradiction. He found clarity. He found coherence. Unlike the doctrines he had studied as a Catholic, Islam spoke to both his heart and mind. The Quran didn't ask him to abandon reason. It demanded that he use it. The concept of God was uncompromisingly singular. No Trinity, no intermediaries, no mythology. Just one God, absolute, eternal, near. And this, to Hofmann's structured legal mind, made perfect sense. He studied quietly over years. He compared translations. He met with Muslims not as subjects of diplomacy, but as fellow human beings. And eventually, in 1980, Murad Wilfried Hofmann embraced Islam, not with fanfare, but with conviction. To many of his colleagues, it was shocking. How could a NATO diplomat, fluent in Enlightenment ideals, turn toward a religion so often portrayed as medieval, foreign, even threatening? But Hofmann had seen something deeper. He believed that Islam was not only compatible with the modern world, it was the solution to its moral confusion. Rather than retreat into silence, Hofmann became one of the most articulate Muslim voices in Europe. He published a series of books that continue to inspire seekers across the globe. Journey to Makkah, Islam, The Alternative, Diary of a German Muslim. His writings offered more than just personal testimony. They were carefully argued, deeply reflective explorations of Islam as a spiritual, intellectual, and civilizational force. The modern West, he wrote, has everything except inner peace. Islam offers that, not through escapism, but through submission to a higher order. For Hofmann, Islam was not about rejection of the West, but a refinement of it, a framework that could restore meaning, discipline, and wholeness in a world increasingly lost in materialism and individualism. He continued to serve as a bridge between two worlds, Europe and Islam, intellect and faith, until his passing in 2020 at the age of 89. But his legacy lives on in his writings, his speeches, and his unwavering commitment to truth. Like Tom Abercrombie, Hofmann's story reminds us that Islam is not confined to any one people or region. It speaks in the language of reason, ethics, and sincerity, across borders, cultures, and professions. One man found it through a camera lens, another found it through a diplomat's pen, but both arrived at the same place, peace through submission to the One. Thanks for watching until the end. I hope it was useful. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.